Today I'm bringing you the mid-year book tag where we talk about my favourite books of the year, my least favourite books of the year, and everything in between. This is a booktube staple. I have done this every year since I started my channel. It was created years before I'd even heard of booktube. The original creators were Ellie from Earl Grey Books and Chami, who I don't believe makes content anymore, but I will have Ellie's original video linked in the description in case you would like to check it out. I have tweaked the questions slightly based on what I'm most interested in talking about, and I also like to start this video by sharing some quick fire reading stats. So according to my reading spreadsheet, I have read 43 books in total this year. 10 of those were 5 stars, which is over 20%, not too bad. 23 of those were 4 stars, 5 were 3 stars, and then there are 4 books that I've read this year that I've given 2 stars. No 1 stars though, which is obviously great. I did have 1 DNF though. My most read genres are fantasy, mystery and thriller and literary fiction, but sci-fi isn't too far behind. I have read a lot more sci-fi than usual this year. 65% of the books that I read were ebooks, around a third were audiobooks, and I've only read 1 physical book, and I know which one it is. It was Murderbot by Martha Wells, because I tried the audiobook and I didn't like it. Moving on to the questions though, and first up we have what is the best book that you've read so far this year? I have tried to only use 1 book per question, or I've tried not to use the same book for multiple questions because I feel like that gives me more books to talk about and it keeps things a little more interesting. But I do think my favourite book that I've read so far this year is The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. This is a beautiful sapphic love story that is set in the Netherlands in 1961. It has this unsettling tension to it, even though it is more character driven. We follow a main character called Isabel, who is very introverted, and her older brother insists that his new girlfriend comes to stay with her for the summer while he's away for work. This woman, Eva, is much more extroverted and they are polar opposites. It's about their relationship, and yeah, even though there's not much plot, you get the feeling that there's maybe something that is being held back from you as the reader, and I did not expect the direction that this went in. I think this is a fascinating time in history where it's actually not that long after World War II and you're still seeing the repercussions of that. Next up we have Biggest Disappointment, and for this I have to go with Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. Unpopular opinion, because I know that a lot of people love this and I was expecting to be one of those people, but I felt like this was a repeat of the original Hunger Games. Compared to the other prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I didn't even like that much, at least that gave a different perspective of the Hunger Games because you saw the early days of what happened. I still don't understand the point of Sunrise on the Reaping. I think that it was mostly catering to fan service, and the themes around government control and propaganda I felt was done so much better in the other books. I didn't feel like Sunrise on the Reaping explored those themes in anywhere near as much depth. Most of the characters felt flat and underdeveloped. I didn't care about the romance. This, in my opinion, is the definition of telling instead of showing. There were these moments that should have been emotional, but instead I felt like I was being told, hey Mitch, who is the main character if you don't know, hey Mitch is now sad, hey Mitch is now angry, hey Mitch is in love with this girl, even though you haven't seen any of that development. Just trust me, hey Mitch is in love with this girl. Oh, and now he has a strong bond with this character, so you should care about this character and what happens to them. Characters would meet, have a conversation, and suddenly they would trust each other inexplicably. I know that this is YA and maybe I'm being very harsh. In fact, I know that I'm being very harsh because the longer that I've had since reading this book, the more annoyed I am that I didn't like it. I thought the writing was just a massive step down from the other Hunger Games books. I feel like this was written to be turned into a movie, and I will probably watch the movie adaptation because it's probably going to be a decent movie, but the book was not good in my opinion. My worst book of the year was actually the first book that I read this year, which was Don't Swipe Right by L.M. Chilton. This apparently is called Swiped in the US, and I listened to it on audio. I picked this up because it's narrated by one of my favourite audiobook narrators, Georgia Maguire, and I did enjoy the experience of listening to the audiobook. I think that's the only reason that I finished it, because I was in the story, but I, did not like the direction that this went in. This was meant to be a fun little thriller. I thought it would be a good way to start the year. It's about a woman who recently recently broke up with her boyfriend a few months ago, and she's since been on the dating apps. She's been on a string of first dates with men that she's met through this one particular app, and then she learns that someone is killing off these men, and she seems to be the one thing that is connecting them, so she's the police's prime suspect. The first half was actually pretty good, but it very quickly went downhill. There's a few different suspects that are presented as options, and at one point I thought I'd worked out who the killer was, but I couldn't think what their motive would be. And then the motive was revealed and I did the biggest eye roll because I hated it. The ending was really over the top, and I can't say much more than that because of spoilers, but yeah, I didn't find the ending satisfying and I gave this 2 stars. Probably won't pick up anything else by this author, unfortunately. My biggest surprise of the year was Destiny's Edge by M.L. Wong, not because I was expecting to dislike this book. I've read other books by this author and loved them. The Sword of Kaigan and Blood over Brighthaven were both at 5 stars for me, but this to me felt like it came out of nowhere. It was announced a couple of weeks ago, well, probably about a month ago by the time this video goes live. It was available for free if you subscribed to the author's newsletter. I don't know if that's still the case. If it is, then I'll leave the details in the description. But yeah, this is a short 200-ish page novella that is intended to be a standalone prequel to a series that M.L. Wong is writing. It follows a main character called Chi, who is the 4th wife of a powerful gem lord within this world, and she has been sent to escort the woman who is to become this guy's 5th wife. But something goes wrong along the way. There's a lot of journeying throughout this book, and I thought it was perfectly paced. There are these moments of action where I felt like I was invested immediately in these characters. I felt tension and stress when they were in danger, but then there's also these quieter emotional moments where you get to see the character development, and it did everything that I wanted it to do. It made me feel excited to pick up the rest of this series. It's made me feel curious to read more within this world, and I think it's a good entryway into M.L. Wong's writing if you've not read anything by her before and you want to try something that's a little bit shorter to get a taste for her writing style. Next up we have Best Written Romantic Relationship, and for this I've gone with Real by Kennedy Ryan. This is the best romance that I've read so far this year. I've not read many, to be fair. I think I've only read 3 and this was an emotional roller coaster. It's a very emotional romance between a film director and the lead actress of the movie that they're making together. It's a movie about a black singer from the 1950s whose story has been lost to history and they are bringing it to life. I love books where characters are creating art and you're seeing them go through that process. This also has snippets from the script of this movie, and I thought that was a really interesting touch that helped me feel more invested. I mean I was already invested, but it helped me feel more immersed in the story. Both of the main characters are very talented in their own rights and they have a lot of respect for one another. The female main character has lupus, which I've not read about before, and I would say that if reading about chronic illness would be a trigger for you, then approach this one with caution and make sure you're in a good headspace because it does get quite heavy at times. But I loved how supportive the main characters were of each other. They're both in their 30s and I appreciated that they felt mature but still had enough flaws where they didn't feel perfect, because I think that would have felt too unrealistic. The best sequel that I've read so far this year I actually have on the shelf behind me. It is The Tapestry of Fate by Shannon Chakraborty. This is the sequel to The Adventures of Amina al-Sharafi, which I reread recently, and I'm glad I did because I felt a little more prepared going into this, even though I would say that these books have their own self-contained plots. Obviously you're following the same characters, and I think this book in particular slows things down a little bit and it focuses more on characters compared to the first book, which has a lot more adventure and action. It's a series that follows a main character called Amina, who is or was a retired pirate inaccurate. However, in the first book, she is convinced to come out of retirement for one last quest. And yeah, there is a complicated friendship in this, which I really appreciated. I liked getting more of a particular character, as well as there's a new character that is in this book that I found just so fascinating. I love it when you're not sure how to feel about a character and you're not sure where their loyalties lie or what is motivating them. This also has a feeling of mystery surrounding the magic, which I loved. And also the ending. The ending was really impactful, and it has me really intrigued to see the repercussions of that in the third book, whenever that comes out, because this one took a few years, but I'm okay with that. Shannon Chakraborty can take however much time she needs to write these books, because I just love her writing so much. Turns out I was lying to myself when I thought I could choose just one book per question. I do have a second answer for this question, and that is Body of Lies by Jo Callahan, the fourth and final book in the Cat and Lock series. This is such a good crime thriller series, and I thought the final book was a really satisfying ending. It hit all of the emotional beats that I wanted it to, and I would recommend this series if it sounds interesting to you. The concept is that you have a police detective who is paired up with an AI detective called Aid Locke, and it's all part of this pilot program where the government want to see how AI can help the police. It never takes a side, so if that's something that you're concerned about, this does have a more balanced approach to this situation. It never says AI is good or AI is bad. There are all of these layers that it unpicks, and I really liked that slightly sci-fi speculative element. For example, Locke can process huge amounts of data very quickly, and he can access and analyse social media profiles, but he can't pick up on sarcasm, and he's not very tactful when it comes to speaking to victims or victims' families, and that's where Kat comes in. And I think their dynamic throughout the series is really interesting. I went to an event with Jo Callahan recently, and it was so fascinating hearing her talk about this series and how people seem to focus on the AI side of things, but it's actually a very human story. Kat and her team go through so much throughout this series, and it is a series that I'd recommend reading in order. If you accidentally skip the first book, then you could go back and read that, I think, if you start with book 2, but I think it is essential to read books 3 and 4 having read the first 2 books. Even though there's a self-contained plot within each book and a different case that the team are investigating, I think you would miss out on a lot if you don't read the books in order, especially the 4th book. I don't think you would like the 4th book if you haven't read the rest of the series. Next up we have a book that made you cry, and the first book I could think of was Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, possibly because I read it quite recently. It was at the forefront of my mind. This is a romance where the main character has a brother who is waiting for a kidney transplant, and there was a moment where I could feel myself getting emotional. I didn't feel like this was in the spirit of the question though, so I've gone with a second option, which actually should have been my first option, because this was, I think, the first book that made me cry this year, and that is The Crippled God by Stephen Erickson, the 10th and final book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. I actually didn't love this book as much as I was hoping to. The last 2 books in this series were a little disappointing for me. I do have spoiler reading vlogs for this series if you have read it and you want to know specifically what I'm talking about, but yeah, I didn't love the pacing throughout this final book. There was half the plot that I just didn't care about, but I did find the last few chapters were quite impactful. There was one scene in particular which made both me and my partner cry. We buddy read this series together. I think there's 2 other moments throughout the rest of this series where I cried. There was one moment where characters who hadn't seen each other for a while were reuniting, and that made me feel quite emotional. And then there's a scene towards the end of book 7. Book 7 is actually one of my least favourite books in the series, but there was one moment where it was like a gut punch. Next we have a book that made you happy, and this was the point where I realised I haven't read many books this year that I would consider happy books. I've put down Everyone in This Bank is a Thief by Benjamin Stevenson because it made me laugh. This is I would call it the third book in the series. There is a novella that comes between books 2 and 3, but I haven't read that, and I don't feel like you need to be able to read this next book. It's a fun, silly, goofy time. It's a murder mystery series that is very self-aware. The main character is narrating the story, and he regularly breaks the fourth wall, and normally that would take me out of the story, but somehow it works because it's done so deliberately. In this particular book, the main character is stuck in a bank during a hostage situation, and as you can guess from the title, everyone in this bank is a thief. Oh, I also finished the Wayfarers series this year by Becky Chambers, and that series as a whole gave me warm, fuzzy feelings, even though it does also have more emotional topics that it dives into. I think just overall that Becky Chambers' writing just feels very comforting to me. Next question is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. The Last Contract of Isako by Fonda Lee. I went to an event with Fonda Lee a few weeks ago where she talked in depth about this book, and it made me even more excited to pick it up. This is a standalone sci-fi, and it follows a main character, a woman who is in her 50s, and she is a legendary swordswoman. She's devoted her life to her job, and when she retires, she plans on ending her own life, as is the custom of this world. But she's offered one final mission that she cannot refuse. I am so excited for this. I am expecting it to be very different from the Greenbone saga, but I'm hoping I love it just as much. Sounds like it's going to be my kind of thing. Even if it wasn't written by Fonda Lee, I feel like I would still be interested in this story. The final question is, what is your most anticipated release of the second half of this year? I have a whole video where I talked about my most anticipated releases for the second half of 2026, so I will leave that linked just in case you missed it, if you would like to check it out. But I think my most anticipated release, actually I have two, so I've lied to you again, but I am so excited for Maisie Wood by Tanana Reeve Dew and As You Wake, Break the Shell by Becky Chambers, because they are both two authors where I've not given them anything less than a 5 stars. So hopefully their new releases are also going to be 5 stars. I would love it if these were two of my favourite books of the year. I think they come out around the same time as well, or a similar time. But that just brings us to the end of this video. So thank you for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments any of your answers to these questions. Let me know your favourite book of the year and your most disappointing book of the year, because I think those are the most interesting questions. Maybe. I'm very overheated right now. So we are going to wrap things up here. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye.